And thank you for all of you who shut off your cell phones. Really appreciate that. There's a few of us here that are electrosensitive, and appreciate that part of it. So tonight we're going to look at the smart meter, an overview of electropollution. We're going to look at the financial issues, the health risks, safety risks, privacy, security, and democracy. And believe it or not, they're all kind of interwoven. And in my studies of in alternative medicine, and just to let you know that what I did was, we have 24 acupuncture meridians, and I had a machine, it was very high-tech from Germany, that when I touched certain acupuncture points, I get feedback on the computer screen. And anything can interfere with that energetic health status of the meridians. And that's how I started to work with the dentistry, but allergies, peanut allergies, pollen allergies, and electrohypersensitivity is one of those. Allergic reaction to electromagnetic fields. So electromagnetic fields have always existed in nature. They're direct current, and it actually was found out in 1952 by Dr. Schumann, who found out that there's a resonant frequency that exists from the surface of the Earth to the underside of the ionosphere, and it's called the Schumann wave, named after him. And it emits a direct current signal that is 7.83 cycles per second, which is exactly the same frequency as your brain. So this particular resonance is energized by lightning strikes, 200 lightning strikes per second, somewhere on the face of the Earth. It keeps the Earth energized. And you can see there the brainwave activity, 4 to 30 cycles per second. The heart rate is at 2. This has been spoken of by Dr. Stephen Sinatra from the Healthy Heart Institute back in Boston. And I specifically noted the pineal gland there because that's the gland that's required to produce melatonin that helps regulate your sleep cycles. And it's not a surprise when as we go through this, you'll see, it's not a surprise that 65% of all North Americans have a sleep problem. It's the largest over-the-counter medication in North America is sleep meds. And people that I work with in health food stores, they tell me that they have parents, mothers usually, coming in to ask for melatonin to put their babies to sleep. And so we'll go a little bit further into that and you'll see, but it has a lot to do with the electromagnetic fields that are in the bedrooms. So these are naturally occurring electromagnetic fields. And what's been found out by Thomas Becker, Einstein, a lot of people have looked at it over the years, that the human body is electric. It requires electricity, whether it's 2 cycles per second, 30, or 100. All the cells in our body are energized by electrical fields. And Dr. Becker, who was an osteopathic surgeon, found that by applying electricity, particularly magnetism, but applying electricity to bones that wouldn't heal, he could speed the healing by about 60%. So he was a brilliant guy, he's still around. Now, here's where the mischief starts. This is the electromagnetic fields that are artificially created. These are generated with hydroelectric dams, nuclear power plants, coal-fired power plants, wind generators, solar generators, and it's distributed through high-tension power lines, which I'm sure we've got some around here. And it then goes to hydro substation, and then it goes to hydro poles, and it goes into your home. And they consist of 3 different fields. Electrical fields, which is just regular building wiring, and extension cords, TVs, home computers, that sort of thing. Magnetic fields are created with bathroom fan, kitchen fan, a blender. My assistant and I checked a blender the other, just an Osterizer blender, and it was 600 milligauss. And we just filled it half with water, and 2 is considered to be the absolute limit by the building biology. And so these things are things you turn on and you walk away from. Because the field would go, if I turn the blender on, it would go from me to you, and the field would be there. So what we're talking about right now, these are extremely low frequency fields. They're on the low end of this electromagnetic spectrum. You can see there the streetcar, the wall plug, the TV, the computer monitor, and a portable radio. Now we get into the mischief that's being created by the smart meter. And it's not just a smart meter, it's also fluorescent lighting. It's low voltage halogen lights. It's dimmer switches in people's homes. When I test homes, dirty electricity is a very, very big problem. And why it's a problem is it works perpendicular to the flow of electricity. So in this wall, there's electricity that flows through the wall. You can see the little blue line there on the screen. That is normal flow of 60 cycles per second. The little squiggly purple lines, those are the lines those are harmonic resonant, which are multiples of the 60 cycles per second. So a fourth harmonic would be 240 cycles per second. And that's what that purple line is. Now I can filter that out, but what we are attempting to do in our business is we're trying to find out the source of it. And the source of it, like I said, fluorescent lighting, low voltage halogens, that sort of thing. And there's something very curious that's happening where people have installed the smart meter, or the Corex has installed the smart meter. People are getting sick and they're not transmitting. So the only thing that we can figure it out is this device there you see, it says CMPS. That's called a switching mode power supply. So what that does is it converts the building's power into direct current, and in doing so it creates enormous dirty electricity. But I can't even measure it with the current meter that I have. I'm having another one made that allow me to measure in a much higher frequency. So into the millions of cycles per second. My meter only measures in the thousands of cycles per second. And this is an example of a reading on an oscilloscope, and this has been verified. We've done it in a lab and taken a look at it. So, more mischief created by the smart meter. This is an ultra-high frequency that's being emitted by the meter, and I'll show you the exact frequencies in a second, but radio frequency radiation is an ultra-high frequency, and superimposed on it, similarly to the dirty electricity, is packets of information. They're called information-carrying radio waves, and they go out in peaks, and the peaks are 2 milliseconds long, and every one of those little peaks that hits, that sends out information about your hydro consumption, what TV you're watching, all those sort of things. Those things jab at your immune system, they jab at your adrenals. Your adrenals are always going fight or flight, fight or flight, fight or flight. They're, you know, your body's always under attack by these signals. And the problem is that the human body has no historical reference for these frequencies. None. Zero. Absolute zero. So the body looks at them as foreign invaders, and it mounts an immune system response, just like it does for people that have got a peanut allergy, a nightshade allergy, or an allergy to pollen in the trees. People are probably going to start getting allergies to the alder trees around here because they start to send out their phenolic compounds about 2 months before the tree actually comes out to leaf. So here's a couple of other examples of where radio frequency radiation comes from. These are cordless phones. These are called DECT phones, a digitally enhanced cordless telephone. I heard a boo. Anyway, the problem with this is that they transmit on 24 hours a day. They're not shut off. The older cordless phones, 900 megahertz, that's 900 million cycles per second, those only transmitted when you pick them up. You can still find one that you can pick up, and 900, you'll find them in garage sales. And believe it or not, the other example there is a DECT baby monitor. So that pad you see there, people put their babies on that, and that is underneath the crib mattress. The baby lays on the crib, and then the mother has one of the devices, the one on the left-hand side here, this one here. That gets clipped on their bag or their purse or whatever, or sits in the kitchen while the baby's sleeping. So if the baby disturbs, it gets transmitted by that device there. And now you wonder why moms are looking for melatonin for their babies.
Or for the moms.
What's that?
Or for the moms.
Or for the moms, yeah. So now we're moving up into the microwave spectrum. We're about halfway up the scale. And you can see there, you see a cell tower, you see a cordless phone, you see a cell phone, and you see a DECT baby monitor, and then it's just starting to get into the radar range. And if anybody says to you that this is the same radiation as the sun, it's not even, the only word is radiation. That's the only similarity. This is so far different than the sun. And the sun can burn you. This is skin cancer I've got on my forehead here that was irradiated to remove. Then I had my nose rebuilt as a result of skin cancer. And so I didn't learn my lesson when I was a lot younger. So it definitely can burn you. Now, it's a little bit, I hope I can present this in a way that you understand what I'm talking about, but the smart meters have got two antennas built inside of them. This is your old meter here, which you should cherish and do whatever you can to protect. And the smart meters have got two antennas. One of them is to communicate from meter to meter to meter. It's called daisy chaining, and there's a slide coming up that'll show that. The other one is a transmitter and receiver, and it is a device that is linked to smart appliances. And smart appliances are appliances that will have a transmitter receiver built into the washer, dryer, fridge, stove, and the transmitter will talk to the smart meter. The smart meter will then relay the information about what time you're washing your clothes, doing your dishes, what time is your heating, ventilating, and air conditioning come on. And now these, it creates what's called a network of appliances. So you can imagine most people have probably 12 appliances in their house that could have transmitters. And it'll be within the next 2 years, you will not be able to buy a new appliance without a transmitter. And that was some serious lobbying that took part on behalf of the appliance manufacturers. They just went to President Obama, and then they went to Harper, and they actually withheld the manufacturing of appliances so they could lobby hard enough to get the transmitters put in. And just imagine the data that they're going to collect from those transmitters. You know, when you do your laundry and all that. But it's, they're trying to create a lifestyle change. And it's meeting with some resistance. So here is the daisy chain effect I'm wanting to show you. You can see the yellow box here on the larger of the houses. That's the smart meter. Inside you see a computer, a TV, and there's a signal that comes in, and it goes from that meter to the next meter, to the next meter, the little green lightning strike, and then it goes to what's called an access point, and it goes to the utility. Now, here is an example of the smart appliances in a house. You see on the upper right-hand side there the HVAC, which is heating, ventilating, and air conditioning. And does anybody have one of those? Somebody must have one of those. It's a big round unit that sits outside your house, a big fan that runs. Yeah. A lot of people have them, particularly you see them in the cities. Then you see a smart oven, you see a washer and dryer there, and you see a smart refrigerator. Now a lot of these appliances, they've already got digital displays on them, and if they've got digital displays, they're already creating dirty power. That just comes with the territory. It comes with electronics, it comes with computers, printed circuits. It creates dirty power. And one of the reasons that we feel the smart meters has come along is because the BC Hydro infrastructure, it's the same pretty much throughout North America, but BC Hydro's infrastructure is so old, it probably needed to be upgraded about 50 years ago. And I work with a lot of electricians, and some of them are, the one I work with now, he's a third generation electrician. And his father's been telling us for a long time that you get these monster homes that are going up in the city, and whereas the homes used to be, 1,500, maybe 2,000 square feet, you're having 4 and 5 and 6, and I've been in some homes that are 10,000 square feet. Well, they can't run on a 100 amp service panel. They go to 400, they go to 600, they've got multiple panels, and that puts a lot of strain on the BC Hydro infrastructure. And there is only one reason for the smart meter, and you'll see it coming up. It's to sell smart meters, and it's to make money. That's the only reason. So this is from the Myth and Fact brochure from BC Hydro. BC Hydro says exposure to radio frequency during the 20-year lifespan of a smart meter, which that should be your first warning signal. These meters here, this one is 60 years old and was working absolutely fine. A friend of mine found it walking her dog, somebody threw it in the ditch. And there's nothing wrong with them. They don't require power to run, whereas a smart meter requires electricity to run. So your bill, whether you like it or not, is going to go up because the meter needs power to run. It's not very much, but it adds up. So they're saying a 20-year lifespan. So that means we're going to have to go through this in another 20 years. And it won't be $1 billion expenditure. It'll most likely be double or triple that. And Dr. Daniel Hirsch, there's a YouTube video about him. You can talk about, just Google into YouTube, Dr. Daniel Hirsch, and there's an interview on there about 5 minutes. He estimates that the smart meter is 100 times more powerful than a cell phone. Primarily because a cell phone you hold to your head. A smart meter is full body exposure. And you can see the graph there. On the extreme far left there is cell phones, and the two blue, and the blue is the minimum exposure, and the red is maximum, and that's smart meters. So you see there's quite a distinctive difference. Here's another myth. Smart meters communicate for a total average of 1 minute per day. We've already had reports, and I've actually tested them. I have a meter here. This is a very sophisticated German device that I've left on all day and didn't get a signal. And I gave it to somebody in North Vancouver. It was transmitting every 6 seconds for 20 minutes, just every 6 seconds. And what they found out was that it wasn't just that it was transmitting every 6 seconds, it was transmitting at a level that's beyond the capacity of this meter. He had something whereby he could figure out that it was 300,000 microwatts per meter squared. And in the testing that I do from the Institute of Building Biology, our standards are 100, and this was at 300,000 every 6 seconds. But that is only at 900 megahertz. Don't forget there's the other frequency that's 2.4. And 2.4 gigahertz is what it's called, is the bottom one. You see the bottom one there. That's the appliance transmission. That's the same frequency as radar. It's the same frequency as a microwave oven, and it's the same frequency as Wi-Fi that's used in our kids' schools. And one of the reasons they use it is that it's got a longer wavelength in terms of radio frequency, and it'll pass through 10 feet of concrete like it's not even there. And which means, I don't know about you, but I've been called a cement head before, but it would go through all of this like nothing. It goes through cars, it vibrates steel in buildings. It's being linked to corrosion in buildings. So we got to calculate out, and we just took BC Hydro's own statement that it's going to transmit 1 minute per day. And it's going to transmit for 2 millisecond bursts. They're peaks of information that go out. But there are 60,000 milliseconds in a minute. So if it transmits for 1 day, and you divide 60,000 by 2, that's 30,000 pulsed high-frequency radiation signals in one 24-hour period. But we already know from the test that we just got in that it was running for 20 minutes at every 6 seconds. So does everybody understand that one? Yes? Good. I like the yes looks. That's good. So here you see some of the other things that are going on in the house, you know, and we have to ask ourselves, are we actually creating a microwave oven out of our home? Because I'll bet most people have these in their home. Cordless phone, you can see there's 3 different frequencies there. You can see the cell phone, there's 2 different frequencies. And then Wi-Fi is usually indoors, and WiMAX is outside. And TELUS is already committed to, I think it's $10 million for places like the Fraser Valley, going up in the Okanagan and Nicola Thompson and all that. They want to put WiMAX in so they can get the signals. Because believe it or not, there are people that their job, it's a pretty nice job, except that you're exposed to a lot of radiation. They drive around in a car and they have a scale on their computer. It's a wireless computer. They drive around and they look for dead zones where instead of getting, if they want 4 bars and it goes down to 2, they mark that spot as a cellular tower location. Possible. Then they start talking to the farmers and they start talking to people. And when you look at, getting a little bit off topic, but when you look at the amount of money that's being thrown around by these companies for one cell antenna, my people tell me that one cell antenna is worth $2,000 per month per year. And there are some towers that have 30, 40 antennas on them. And they can be 2 or 3 different carriers, you know, Verizon, Wind Mobile, can also be Bell, Rogers, and Shaw's going to go into the market at some point. And so it's a lot of money. So it's pretty, when you're struggling to keep a farm afloat or a small community, and somebody walks in and say, well, yeah, we'll give you $50,000 a year to have that on the roof of your building. Pretty hard to turn down for a lot of people. Then you see microwave oven there. There's a new super Wi-Fi that's coming. That was Google and Verizon and a couple of the cellular carriers in the United States purchased the frequency that was left vacant when the TV signals went from analog to digital. That left a gap, and they bid on it. It was an enormous amount of money. It was like $50 billion or something. And then the RFID on the bottom, that's radio frequency identification tags. That's coming to supermarkets near you and clothing stores. They're now being put into the waistband of clothes and the hems of skirts and slacks. And it's something when you pass by a scanner, it reads the information to say that this is a size 32. I wish. This is a size 32 with a 36 leg. But these are passive chips, and they're only activated when you go by a scanner. But they're now putting them into boxes of soap. And they're activated, believe it or not, they're doing it in Brazil. They're put in boxes of soap. They're in the very bottom of the box. So you take your scoop and you scoop the last part of the soap out and you activate the chip. And the chip sends a message to Colgate Palmolive or Cheer or Tide or whatever. And then all of a sudden you get a message, either through cloud advertising or through you get a message saying, oh, Mr. Jones, how'd you like to win a trip to Florida? Compliments of Cheer, enter this contest. It's all about marketing. And these RFID chips, it's not always good news when I come to do these presentations, but the RFID chips have now been miniaturized, that they're now what they call nanoparticles, which are the same size as dust. So they're putting the chips, they've been granted approval by the FDA, that wonderful organization, which is, we won't go there. They're going to be put into medications, and the RFID chip, you'll swallow it with your medication. And then the pharmacist will be able to do a scan and find out if you took your medication, if you've been compliant to your medications. Look up, see a few people going, oh God. Look up natural news on the internet. And Mike Adams is a reporter who reports on things like this, and he's got all the documentations on there. You can also look it up on Dr. Joseph McCullough's website. And it goes on and on and on and on. I mean, RFID chips are what they put in eagles and moose, coyotes, all those things that they track through the bush. Those are all radio frequency identification tags. And they're actually looking to get them implanted in people. So they can track people, like track criminals and that sort of stuff. But it's not too far of a stretch in the imagination to imagine where else that we put. So we want to get into a few of the health risks and the safety risks. And what we found is that I've watched many of the Corex installers install the meters. They do it the way they were trained. However, it's called arcing. You can see there are four little copper strips here. And the meter goes in, and there's this is what they call a male, sorry, I'm not being, anyway. These are the male portions, and then there's female clips, they call them, on the thing, and you put the meter in like this, you push it up, and you bang it, and it goes in. But if you have one of these out of alignment, when you go to put it in, you can have something like 10,000 amps of power flash, or send a spark, or a surge into the house. And the utility companies across the country are all unanimous. I think there must be an old boys club, and they get in the back rooms and say, we're not going to honor any of these complaints, because as you can see there's 800 fires that started in California, 35 in Florida, there's been 6 here in BC, and mysteriously, it's only after the meter goes in. People didn't have any problem at all. They run their appliances, put their smart appliances in or whatever, they have no problem. The meter goes in, and all of a sudden, the wiring melts down, something with a microcircuit blows, and this is what it looks like. So that's the smart meter there, and that's the house that it was installed on. You can see the big scorch mark up the side, and that's in Santa Rosa, outside of San Francisco, California. And there are hundreds of these photos on the internet that are showing these meters. And it's already happened here in BC, if you report a fire and say, I want you guys to come out, it happened, there's a couple of them in Nanaimo, I want you to come out and take a look at that, and BC Hydro will say, I'm sorry, ma'am, sir, we are responsible from the hydro line, the service drop to the house, down the mast to the meter, everything on your side of the wall is your responsibility, therefore it's your problem. They're that arrogant and then just cut off it. They just cut the communication off. They won't talk to you anymore about it. Yeah, Wendy.
Can I just say that I phoned my insurance company? I talked about this online, and they just said that obviously they must be okay. I asked them if it would be okay to put a smart meter on because it's not CFA approved. And they were pretty clueless actually. They just said, well, they're going all over mission, so they must be okay. And then I asked them if they would write it into my insurance claim, like I have with my wood stove, and they said no. So you might want to check that out.
We've
because
had
they don't really understand yet.
Lots of these seminars. It's kind of, some people say their insurance company says it's okay, but you don't know until it happens. If it happens. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but if it does happen, you want to make sure that your backside's covered and all your appliances are covered in your home. I mean, 800 fires, that's a little bit beyond the world of coincidence. And only after the meters went in, not before. And I mean, in my business, checking homes, yes, we do find wiring errors and we can fix them. But there's something that takes place when that meter goes in, that there's a surge that creates problems. It's absolutely undeniable. They just won't admit to it. So some of the health risks are, and I'll do a little demonstration about this in a second, but it affects people's ringing of the ears. It gives people headaches. People in severe cases, if they have multiple meters on a wall, like say, some of the not townhouses, but condos might have 20, 30 meters on one wall. And people are sleeping on the other side of the wall. And they get nosebleeds, dry coughs, lung infections, earaches, headaches, tendinitis, which is a ringing in the ears, and that drives people crazy because it won't stop, it doesn't stop. And bear in mind, the meters are not transmitting yet. So you can see melatonin, sleep disorders, neurodegenerative diseases, that's ALS, MS, Parkinson's, that's the Lou Gehrig disease, the ALS. And dementia. Dementia is now, it's now an epidemic. And that's all to do with neurology of the brain. And don't forget, this is this vibration constantly, your body's never having a chance to rest. And then we've got the increased cancer risk. And one of my big pet peeves is this whole issue around the disappearance of the honeybees. And migratory birds are disappearing. I think this is the next slide. Oh, this is just a reference to DNA. The honeybee slide's coming up. This is a universally accepted method of determining double-strand DNA breakage. It's called a Comet-assay, and it's because the DNA molecule looks like a comet. And you can see the one on the screen left, it's normal, there's nothing wrong with it, just that's what it normally looks like normally. I see it's a little bit overexposed on the slide, but right here, there's a tail right there. It looks like a cloud that's falling. It's like a meteor going through the sky. And that first one there is what the DNA looks like after 1,600 chest x-rays. And the one below it is after a 24-hour exposure of a cell phone at 1,800 megahertz, which is a pretty typical frequency for cell phones. And you see that SAR there, that stands for specific absorption rate. And that reading they got there was at 1.3 watts per kilogram. And the initials down below stand for International Commission on Ionizing Radiation and the World Health Organization. They set the limit at 2. So it's very tricky how they work this up, but it's very risky. So more of the health concerns, there are no health standards for what's called non-ionizing radiation. That's radiation that does not produce a heating effect. And the way they determine the heating effect is they take somebody my size, 6 foot, 6'1", 200 pounds, and they have it's a mannequin, they fill it with water, they put a temperature probe in through the top, they put the phone on there, they put it at the ear, they clamp it, and they leave the phone on, and they're looking for an increase in temperature of 1 degree centigrade in the inside of the brain in I believe it's like a 20-minute period. And I don't know about you, but how many people have got children whose temperature goes up 1 degree centigrade is a lot in terms of, you know, heating the body. And the only limits that are set, and you'll see this if you go to a meeting with BC Hydro representatives, they'll say, well, it's well within the guidelines proposed by Health Canada, which is safety code, they call it Safety Code 6. And Safety Code 6 is, I can't even think of a comparison of what it would be like, but it's like Safety Code 6 guidelines are out in Mars, somewhere out in the universe. We're talking about here on Earth. It's very, very, very different. It's billions of times different. And the safety guidelines for Safety Code 6 are for gamma rays, X-rays, way up at the far end of the spectrum. And as an example of, this is where Canada stands in the world, this slide here. You can see the highlighted one there, 1,000 microwatts per centimeter squared. That was set in 1997, and at that time there was probably maybe 3 billion cell phones on the planet. Now it's just gone past 6 billion cell phones. There's 7 billion people on the planet, 6 billion cell phones. And if you wonder how I can come to that conclusion, is that they now give phones to people that live without electricity in Africa. So a lot of the people in Africa are getting cell phones. And I don't know how they work this out, but they go to a charging station, they pick up a new battery for the phone or a new phone, and they can exchange the minutes of a cell phone for groceries. So they go into Mr. Jones's store and say, I'd like a bag of potatoes and some rice and all that. Yeah, it's only 10 minutes on your cell phone. That's how it gets paid.
Wow.
But when you see the excitement on the people's faces because they haven't been able to talk to their mother in 2 or 3 years, and all of a sudden they get a cell phone, the mother gets a cell phone, they've now got this communication thing. So they're becoming just as addicted to the phones as we are in North America, which is insane. And you can see we're at 1,000 microwatts per centimeter squared, and the very top one there is 0.1 microwatts per centimeter squared in Salzburg, Austria. And you might have more cell towers over there, but the power density, the power emitted by the cell towers or cell antennas is drastically reduced. We're talking thousands and thousands of times difference here. And in places like, you know, they have a precautionary limit in Paris, but in Paris, the French government has just taken all the Wi-Fi out of the schools, and it's just taken Wi-Fi out of all government buildings. You see a lot of changes happening in a lot of these countries here where they have socialized medicine, so people get sick, it costs the government money, they don't like that. So they have a really strong precautionary principle. So then the blue part there is where the Safety Code 6 regulations are in effect. You see X-rays, gamma rays, part of the visible light spectrum, and then ultraviolet. And just so that it just popped into my head, I wanted to mention something about it, is that this ultraviolet spectrum, this is a very dangerous area for people, and this is what's wrong with the compact fluorescent light bulbs. You know, little corkscrew light bulbs? I've seen so many people that use them as reading lights. If the reading light is here and coming this way, they'll be red on the side of your face. And they get a first-degree burn from it. And it affects people's blood sugar balances. It has a lot of problems associated with it, but it's the wrong wavelength. Yes, Wendy.
Can I just make a comment? I talked to my electrician, he went to an electrician forum, and one of the electricians there said he was doing all the good energy efficient stuff, and he changed all his light bulbs to the CFL ones. And all of a sudden he noticed his kids weren't sleeping. So it took him a while to figure it out, but then he changed back to the old light bulbs, and within a few days they were sleeping fine. So that's from an electrician at a forum, and it was others who sort of came up with the same solution or whatever.
It'll be part of my dog and pony show at some point, but I'll have one sitting here. Because I have a particular meter that turns magnetic fields into an audible tone. And when I can go by all the incandescent light bulbs, and if there's one compact fluorescent in there, my meter will just scream. Because it's hard to pick it up with a regular magnetic meter. And then, you know, we have to ask, who does it affect? You know, people with pacemakers, defibrillators, heart conditions, strokes, epileptic seizures. Attention deficit people are really affected by this. Hyperactive disorder, autism. So we've all heard, there's a number of us in here that are over 50, I can see, that we've all heard of thalidomide. We all know about the birth defects that was a result of women taking that when they were pregnant. We all know about asbestos, DDT, Vioxx, tainted blood, the number of people that became HIV positive as a result of tainted blood. Tobacco has been ongoing forever. And I added these other three there, the radio frequency radiation, because we all have to understand that there's never, ever, ever been a test done to show that wireless radiation is safe. Not ever. And BC Hydro will tell you it's safe. But if you ask them, and we're going to ask them in the next meeting, you ask them, show me the paper. Come on, show me the paper. They can't. They won't. Oh, send me an email. We'll send it. What's your email address? You won't get it. And if you correspond with BC Hydro, just a little coaching, if you have anything that you want to talk to them, do not accept an email. Say you want it in writing. You want a hard copy. And so radio frequency is really an unknown commodity. You know, we don't know what the long-term effects are. It's starting to show up now in kids that are 20 years old, in their early 20s. The neurosurgeons around the world are finding more and more and more tumors of the saliva gland, tumors of the TMJ joint, tumors in the ear, tumors in the thyroid, hormonal imbalances in young girls. It's showing. Now, the reason I put the 1996 Telecommunication Act is there. In 1993, Dr. George Carlo, who you can also look up on the internet, one of the smartest people that I've ever spoken to, brilliant medical doctor, he's an American trial lawyer, he's an epidemiologist, he's a baseball coach for the professional leagues, he's an amazing man. He was hired in 1993 to buy the cell phone industry to prove that wireless radiation was safe and cell phones were fine. 3 years in, he started, and don't forget, he was hired by the industry to prove it. $28.5 million for the study. He had 200 scientists working on it. Within a couple of years, they started seeing all these horrific things that we mentioned before. The blood-brain barrier leakage, the DNA damage, the shock proteins, calcium ion release out of cells, RNA damage. And he went before the industry, and they fired him. They cut his funding. They defamed him. Mysteriously, his beautiful Georgian mansion on the East Coast burned to the ground. His marriage was destroyed. But coincidentally, in 1996, the telecommunication industry went before Congress and they created something called the Telecommunication Act, whereby they are granted total immunity from any health effects that come from a cell phone. So, and even if you had a tumor that said eye tumor on it, or if it said Mercola, or not Mercola, if it said Motorola, or it said Cisco or something on it like that, the brand of a phone, you still wouldn't have a leg to stand on. They granted themselves their own immunity. They protected themselves. And then in 2002, Lloyd's of London, probably one of the more riskier insurance agencies, came out and said, we're not going to insure the industry anymore. So the majority of the carriers have no insurance. If they have insurance, it might be for damage of like a physical damage, dropping the phone or something like that. But they're, in terms of you having a leg to stand on if you have any health challenges as a result of it, And here's my two friends, Lisa and Gabrielle, at the in front of BC Hydro, where we did a protest. And you know, we started looking at a lot of people who were having problems, and MCS is multiple chemical sensitivity, which I used to work in that area, looking for the sensitivities that people had in which particular chemical. And then people with previous illnesses like cancer, recovering from surgery, ALS, MS, Alzheimer's, dementia, which we mentioned before. And what's really curious, I've done talks, not this specific talk, but I did a lot of volunteer work trying to raise awareness about mercury, and I worked for as a volunteer for the Parkinson's group, raising money, and also with the MS Society. And what I found really interesting is if we had a room of people like this here, and I asked how many they'd have to put their thinking caps on for a sec, and I asked them, how many people were presented with MS symptoms around major dental work? And out of 25, I'd have 23. And most of them would have a mouthful of amalgam fillings. They might have had root canal surgery or some invasive procedure, and 6 months, maybe a year later, they get MS symptoms. And the same thing is with Parkinson's. That's a little aside. Here we are with the honeybees. You can look these two gentlemen up online if you like. Dr. Albert Manville he's the head of U.S. Department of Fish and Wildlife, and he has now estimated just from cell towers alone and the frequencies emitted by the antennas that it's attracting migratory birds that fly at night, and they've now got calculations of 50 million birds per year are disappearing as a result of the antennas alone. You have to understand, there's over 1 million antennas in the United States. We have about, the last check I did was close to 1,000 from my home in White Rock to downtown Vancouver. And Dr. Manville is actually isolating trees with copper wire. It's called a Faraday cage. He's covering entire trees, then he's exposed them to wireless radiation, and he sees the trees that are inside the Faraday cage protected from the RF. They are thriving. The ones outside are not so. They get leaf curl, they're stunted in their growth. Not a lot, but it's definitely a difference. So he's wondering what's it doing to all the migratory birds and the honeybees. Dr. Halter's done work with the honeybees. And what they saw was that after 30 minutes of exposure, it took them 3 minutes to recover. But after 20 hours of exposure, this is a cordless phone or cell phone next to a hive. After 20 hours, it took them 12 or more hours to recover, and then the colony collapsed 5 to 10 days later. And what they now determined is happening is the birds have it too. It's a substance called magnetite. It's a magnetic substance. We have it at the base of our brain. Bees have it in their tummies, and birds have it in their beaks. And they orient themselves according to the magnetic lines that are in the earth. And Aboriginal people have known this forever. And you go into some forests and you'll see deer and rabbits and things will take the same path all the time. And if you have somebody that knows how to find these called ley lines in the earth, that will be where there's a ley line, where there's a magnetic field. And that's why they track that way. They can go that way in the dark. And colony collapse disorder right now is being blamed on a mite, which is like a parasite. But it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out if their little immune systems are challenged, they get so weak, they're susceptible, just as human beings are. When your immune system is in the toilet, your body is more susceptible to parasites and to germs and all that. And the same thing is happening with the bees. And then Professor Dennis Henshaw, he references over 8,000 articles describing low-level radiation and its effect on animal navigation, plants, and health of the animal kingdom. And if you try to talk to somebody that raises bees, that sells honey, they don't want to hear this, that it's radio frequency radiation. They want to hear that it's mites. And the United States has lost 70% of their bee population in the last 4 years. And according to Albert Einstein, if the bee population disappears, and this is Einstein saying this, and he died in '49, I think. he said it back then, if they disappear, we've got about 5 years. Because they pollinate over half of all the crops. But don't worry, Monsanto will come to the rescue with genetically modified wheat. So one of the things you'll hear a lot in scientific circles when you're talking about radiation, whether it's cell phone, Wi-Fi, WiMAX, smart meters, or whatever, is that the scientific community bases a lot of weight on evidence. And when you ask them to produce the weight of evidence showing that they're safe, they can't do it. However, we have enough paper now in terms of things like the Freiberger Appeal, the American Academy of Environmental Medicine. They've examined all these things. In Victoria, our colleagues over there took 40 banker boxes. You know, those are like file boxes that you get at Staples or something. They took 40 of them. That's how much volume of paper was used just in the reports showing that there were harmful effects attributable to wireless radiation. 40 file boxes. And on the lid of the boxes, what had been written was the title of the various paper, like the Bioinitiative report, or Ole Johansson's work, or Reese Halter's work, or something like that. And it was in, because nobody wanted to decimate half a forest for all the paper it would take to fill those boxes. But you can see that the Freiberger Appeal was signed by 6,000 qualified and concerned health. These are all doctors. And they're calling for the precautionary principle. If you can't prove this is safe, let's just hold back here and not advance the way they're doing it. The way they're, putting Wi-Fi in all the schools, and WiMAX is up and down the beach in White Rock. There's now 300 systems on White Rock Beach. They've just finished doing all the WiMAX, which is outdoor Wi-Fi, and then they've got 267 systems already installed in businesses and residences that are on the street on the Marine Drive. You can see there the American Academy of Environmental Medicine. They're calling for the precautionary principle again. And let's see. Then our own World Health Organization came out and classified it as a 2B possible carcinogen. And if you ask, BC Hydro is now going around and telling everybody that the World Health Organization says it's safe.
I saw that.
How did they translate that? How did they come to that when it says it's a possible risk of cancer and that somehow says it's safe? That's what they use. You saw it somewhere?
I saw it on the internet under that article where they were talking about the smart meters.
Right.
It said right on there, and I'm like, I can't believe this because I just read that the World Health Organization said what you said. How is it they're putting false stuff on their statements?
But they are a crown corporation.
I just noticed too on the Utilities Commission website, they have a fact sheet, and there's a lot of false information on there. I couldn't believe some of what I was reading. Some of what I totally know is false.
Yeah. So I don't know how many of you have been following the World Health Organization in its track record over the last 20 years, but it's not great. They're an ultra-conservative organization, heavily influenced by the pharmaceutical industry. Heavily. And so if they're saying that it's a possible carcinogen, you have to ask yourself, is that the tip of the iceberg? What are they not saying? What do they know they're not saying? So this is one of my favorite reports. This was 2,000 scientific, peer-reviewed, replicated studies. And 14 working scientists with no ties to the industry examined all of this evidence, and they came up with this. They were unanimous in looking at Alzheimer's, pathological leakage of the blood-brain barrier. I guess it's the time for me to be doing my demonstration of the blood-brain barrier. I'm just going to sneak around here. Can you follow me, Gary?
Yep, we got you.
Okay. So this is the blood-brain barrier is a barrier that surrounds your brain. And it's very much like this column. So like this. This protects my brain, right? Nothing can get through there. And these holes represent holes that are in the blood-brain barrier that allow for the nutrients in the bloodstream to flow through the blood-brain barrier and nurture the brain, and if they're toxins to come back out. But it will only accept a certain molecular weight, represented by these Suzuki beads. So they won't go through. You know, they're there. So those are things like heavy metals, formaldehyde, toxins that are in personal care products, cleaning products. But when you come along and the bloodstream's got things like this wonderful quinoa in it, my favorite grain, but in this case, the quinoa is representing mercury, other heavy metals, lead, and when the blood-brain barrier is in place, they can't get through. But when the blood barrier lowers, and that's after a 2-minute cell phone call, the blood-brain barrier drops for 20 minutes. And this is and Dr. Carlo did a lot of research on this, and this is where they figured the rise in autism has come from, because of the amount of the amount of vaccines children are getting before they go to school. So you can see it just falls right through. That's what happens when the blood-brain barrier is leaking. It just allows all the toxins to go through, which before could not get in there. The DNA damage we already saw with the Comet-assay. And then this is a few things that are happening with our own government. Our own government is recommending non-industry funded studies, long-term studies. But when you consider, and I need to update this slide, when you consider that now there are 6 billion phones, where are they going to get the control group? If the phones are now being given to people in Africa and all kinds of third world countries, where are you going to get a control group to do a study? It's not possible. And even if they didn't have a cell phone, there's still going to be cell phone towers, there's still going to be, in places where they have smart meters, you're going to be heavily influenced by that. And Dr. Henry Lai, who's one of the chief scientists that worked with Dr. George Carlo, they found, when they examined all the studies out there, they found that only 25% of the industry-funded research found biological effects. However, the non-industry funded studies found 75%. Kind of curious, it makes you wonder if the results are maybe linked to the wallet, the wallet, the wallet, the wallet, the wallet.
There's nothing but lies in the words that our leaders have spoken, and no one can deny our democracy's broken. What can everyday people do with what we've learned? Let's take back the power, now it's our turn to fly like an eagle, soar out over the sea. 'Cause this earth is our mother, let's show that we love her. Let's rise up and make history. People stand up and keep them straight. You gotta get on board before it's too late. Yeah, people stand up and keep them straight. Let's get on board before it's too late. Let's keep them straight.